Elizabeth Clare Prophet, noted author, lecturer, and educator, interviews the special people who provide the missing dimension to the news that affects you. Courageous men and women from all over the world who have taken a stand for truth and justice and become spokesmen for the flame of freedom. Listen now as Elizabeth Clare Prophet and her guest discuss critical issues of the day. This week, Mrs. Prophet continues to talk with ZECHARIA SITCHIN, author of The 12th Planet. In part one of this controversial forum, Mr. Sitchin presented his case for a planet in our solar system beyond Pluto, whose astronauts, called Nephilim, have been visiting Earth for 450,000 years, whose wars led to a nuclear holocaust in the Middle East 4,000 years ago, and who, through genetic engineering, were responsible for the creation of Homo sapiens.
Welcome to Summit University Forum, where the flame of freedom speaks. Today our guest is ZECHARIA SITCHIN. He was born in Russia and raised in Palestine, where he acquired a profound knowledge of modern and ancient Hebrew and other Semitic and European languages, the Old Testament, the history of archaeology of the Near East. A leading journalist and editor in Israel for many years, he now lives and writes in New York. In 1976, Mr. Sitchin published the first of his Earth Chronicles series, The 12th Planet, a revolutionary work which made a case for the existence of another planet in our solar system, whose astronauts have been visiting the Earth for 450,000 years. It was followed in 1980 by The Stairway to Heaven, and in June of this year he published The Wars of Gods and Men, a startling work that provides evidence that the wars of men began with the wars of the gods, wars for the control of this Earth, which began on their own planet and led to a nuclear holocaust in the Middle East 4,000 years ago. ZECHARIA SITCHIN, welcome to Summit University Forum. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. I've been waiting a long time to be invited.
Well, this is the long-awaited moment for us. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
Please continue on this concept of the birth goddesses.
Well, this is how, according to the Sumerians, our ancestors, you and I, have come to be on this earth. And what I want to stress here, because some people don't grasp it or don't follow it willingly, perhaps, that is that there's absolutely no conflict between evolution and the Bible, or the Bible as I understand it based on the Sumerian sources, because according to the Sumerians there was evolution on Earth. What they said is that when Marduk, or Nibiru, collided with Tiamat, breaking it up in two halves, and Earth was one of those halves, the seed of life was passed by Nibiru Marduk to Earth. In other words, according to the Sumerian beliefs, and this is also my philosophy, universal belief, is that life was brought into our solar system by the means of Nibiru Marduk from another solar system. The seed of life, therefore, was passed from it to Earth about 4 billion years ago. Then evolution began on both planets, on Marduk and on Earth. Since Marduk had it before, the process was a little more advanced. When they came here, when they came to Earth, through the same seed of life, they found also evolutionary development, but not as advanced as theirs. And therefore they did what I would call, they jumped the gun on evolution. I believe that we, Homo sapiens, would have evolved on Earth anyway, but in 5 million or 10 or 20 million, I don't know how long, they jumped the gun. The verses, I'm going back to the beginning of all my researches and my interest in the subject in chapter 6 of Genesis. that say that they married the daughters of men, and the English translation again would be that, and they saw that they were good, the daughters of men. This is not the Hebrew term. The Hebrew term means that, and they saw or they found out that they were compatible, because unless they had the same genetic makeup, how could they have children? So they came here and they found evolution, ape man, ape woman, not to use, too scientific terminology. They jumped the gun, they created us, and we were compatible with them.
And the chief thing they were looking for was the thumb, the ability to work the minds.
At the beginning. Now what happened was that as more of us came into being, and the tale of the Garden of Eden is really the tale of how Homo sapiens was given the ability to procreate. Because, as I suppose some of our audience and readers know, hybrids, like mules, cannot procreate. And that was the problem with the early Homo sapiens. They just had to employ the so-called birth goddesses, implant the fertilized eggs, wait for them to give birth, and how long could you do that? So again, Enki, plus his half-sister Ninhursag, developed the second phase in our evolution to give us the ability to procreate by adding one chromosome to our genes. So as men developed and filled up the earth and undertook other tasks besides the mines, agriculture, growing food, growing sheep, and other domesticated animals, a watershed event, not just physically, literally, but also conceptually, happened, and that was the great flood or the deluge, which, according also to the Bible, after that, the whole relationship between the Elohim, the plural, the term used in the Bible, and mankind changed, because once earth was completely devastated, the only way to continue surviving on earth, which they had to do for their needed gold, was to make man a partner, no longer a servant, but a partner to life, to civilization on earth. And it was after that that they divided the earth into 4 regions. They were still lords, they were still masters, but they created the institution of kingship, which we still have to this day, and they gave men 3 regions. They did keep 1 region for themselves, the so-called the sacred or unapproachable region, where they set up their space facilities, because Sipar, the pre-diluvial spaceport, was also wiped out by the deluge. They needed a new one, and that region, as I show in the a new book, was in the Sinai Peninsula. Just like I asked the teacher years ago, who were the Nephilim, I asked myself, what's so special about the Sinai Peninsula? Because there's nothing there. Now, the Sinai Peninsula, because there was nothing there, because there were no rivers there that could sustain a civilization, agriculture, cities, was selected by them to be what they called the 4th, the sacred region. And all those lands surrounding it, including Jerusalem, including Lebanon, the so-called lands of the Bible, were really called in those ancient times the lands of Shem. All the lands in between, Mesopotamia, which used to be the place of the spaceport of their first settlements, and the lands that were thus after the deluge, Lebanon, Canaan, the Sinai Peninsula, were the lands of Shem. And what did Shem mean? Shem meant rocket ship. They were the lands of the rocket ships. And the people descended of Shem inhabited the lands of the rocket ships. Now, I show the scheme of the spaceport, the landing corridor to it, and what its anchors were. And as you can see, the center was Jerusalem. Jerusalem was called, also in the Bible, the navel of the earth. Again, nobody stopped to ask why. It was called the navel of the earth because it was the center of this whole grid for landing on earth. The anchor was Mount Ararat, which in the biblical tale and in the Sumerian tale was called the Mount of Salvation, where Noah's Ark landed and where they came after the deluge when they landed from their orbiting spacecraft. The landing corridor passed through a place called today Baalbek. It's now, unfortunately, the center of much of the terror organizations in the Middle East. But still existing there and going back, according to local legends, to the times before the deluge, there is a vast platform paved with huge stones, about 500,000 square feet. And in its base, supporting a certain section of it, there are stone blocks that are, many of them weigh 600 tons. For example, the largest stones in the pyramids weigh 200 tons, so you get a comparison. So there is a vast platform on which ancient peoples built temples in honor of its sacredness. What we see today are ruins of Roman temples. Some of them are the largest temples ever built by the Romans. The largest temples built by the Romans are not in Rome, but are at that place, Baalbek. And in ancient times, that was the place to which Gilgamesh went on one of his journeys, trying to be taken aloft. Now, supporting a section where very heavy loads must have been placed, like the stationing or the coming down of a rocket ship, were those blocks weighing 600 tons, and some of them 1,100 tons, 1,100 tons. Now, even today, we do not have a piece of equipment that can lift 1,100 tons. We know where those blocks were quarried because one of them was found still lying in situ, half quarried and partly unquarried, in a place in a valley not far from Baalbek. And in antiquity, and according to the legends before the deluge, someone quarried those blocks, lifted them, took them up a mountain a few miles away, 4,000 feet up, and actually placed them precisely to fit one another without mortar, without cement, but you cannot even insert a razor blade. I think I have here one of the sketches. This is the one lying in situ. You can see that little fly on top of it. That's a man sitting on that block, which gives you an idea of the size of it. Now this is one of them. Actually, there are three of them in place at the base of the platform, which stretches way behind there. Again, you can see a man here, and this is the relationship. So someone in antiquity could have done, had actually achieved that.
How do you think they did it?
Well, I just assume that they had the technology. If they could fly in space and do other things, they probably had the technology. Some, since having read this in my book, say, well, maybe they had anti-gravity capabilities, perhaps, I don't know. But anyway, that place is here in Baalbek, which is part of this landing grid. This is Jerusalem, this is Mount Ararat. Now, this landing corridor had to have 2 beacons at each end. Here they built artificial beacons, 2 artificial mountains. That's what they were called, the artificial mountains, which we call the Great Pyramids of Giza. They were not built by any pharaoh. They were built by them right after the deluge. And here they selected 2 mountains, which are sacred to this day. This are the 2 mountains near the monastery of Santa Caterina. One of them is called Mount Moses. The other is called by an adjoining name, not too familiar to people. But there are actually two mountains here and 2 mountains here. And this was the reason for the Sinai Peninsula being sacred to this very day.
It's most interesting. I remember standing at Baalbek in 1972 and spending a considerable time there, and of course never dreaming of the implications that you're telling us.
Were you at the southwestern corner where this huge platform, the massive platform is, where the 6 pillars are still standing?
We went where all the ruins were of Rome and wherever the guides took us.
Well,
We spent a good day there, so perhaps we were right there.
well, you stood where the Nephilim had stood.
We were very conscious of the vibrations of the place.
There are many subterranean structures, tunnels, which have not yet been entered. There was several attempts made to penetrate the platform, the stone platform, and see what's under it, but they all failed. Nobody could break through.
So in fact, we don't know what's under
We
it.
don't know. Well, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, telling his adventures going to that place, there is a mention that he found the entrance to the tunnel of the Anunnaki under the platform, but at the last minute he was prevented from entering by Ishtar, the goddess we've just seen. She didn't let him go in.
She prevailed at the door.
Well, it's really, there was more to it. She wanted, the price of permission was for him to make love to her. And he knew that no mortal making love to her would remain alive. So he withstood the temptation. So there's a lot of hanky-panky going on too.
Gilgamesh, of course, did ultimately go on to find the secret of their eternal
Well,
youth.
he went, his next journey was to the Sinai Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
It was the second destination. The Epic of Gilgamesh actually calls that the place of the missiles. The Baalbek site is called in the Epic of Gilgamesh the landing place. The other one is called the site of the land of the missiles. He made a lot of headway there, and he met there, according to the Sumerian tale, he met there none other than Noah, who was still alive, though thousands of years had passed since the deluge, because the brother Enlil had promised Noah that he would be saved from man's fate to die, because he was the hero of the deluge and helped preserve the seed of mankind. And Gilgamesh went there, deeming Noah, or in his Sumerian name, Utnapishtim, deeming him to be one of his ancestors. Gilgamesh also believed, like pharaohs or like Alexander much later after him, believed that he is entitled to escape mortality because his mother was a goddess. And indeed, this is an interesting detail, that because in his case the mother was a goddess, not a father as Alexander had believed or claimed, he was considered 2/3 divine, not just half. And he therefore argued with some of the Anunnaki leaders. He said, if I'm 2/3 divine of your genetic material, why should I die like a mortal? And when he went in his search for immortality, reaching the place in the Sinai Peninsula, discovering Utnapishtim, or the biblical Noah there, and saying to him, since you have lived so long, thousands of years, tell me the secret. How come you are still alive? How come that you, a man from thousands of years ago, look like me? That was, by the way, one of his questions. And it is there in that epic of Gilgamesh that the story of the deluge is told. This is where scholars have found the so-called Babylonian, Mesopotamian, Sumerian tale of the deluge. This hero of the deluge tells him, since you have found me, let me tell you what happened, and tells him the story of the deluge, of the ark, how he was saved, how he saved the seed of mankind, and therefore he was granted longevity. But he said, since there's no other deluge, how can you attain immortality? So Gilgamesh started to cry and beg for some way. So he said, there is a well in the Sinai Peninsula. This was really one of the places that Alexander was looking for, the source of the waters of life. He says, there is a well within which there grows a plant. If you would dive down and find the plant and take it with you and eat of it, each time that you get older, if you would eat of it, you would be forever young. That is how you will escape mortality. This is, by the way, the story of Ponce de Leon, you know, looking for the fountain of youth. So Gilgamesh dived, according to his epic tale, found the plant, and was wandering back to his city, to Erech in Mesopotamia, in Sumer. But when he stopped to bathe in a brook, a serpent came and stole the plant.
What was the fate of Noah, since he was supposed to be immortal?
No, he was not immortal. He was given longevity.
Just
Eventually
longevity.
he died. Eventually he died, because they too, the Nephilim, there are tales of how they died. There are tales of how they were revived, brought back to life from death. And there are tales, which I haven't told yet, but I'm keeping them for the next book, of how they died. Because if we believe that any of them were born, then we must believe that some of them have died. I don't think there can be birth without death. So we are talking here about incredible longevity.
Because of their
orbit, because
the
to them,
3,600.
that's right,
3,600 years to our 1 year.
to our 1 year.
Does that really mean they do not age more than we do in 1 year, in 3,600 years?
Yes, well, if you look here at Enki, in my estimate, he was about, I would say, 140 years old in their terms.
140 times 3,600?
3,600, right.
Is he alive today?
I don't know. I don't think he's on our planet anymore, but whether he's back alive on their planet, I don't know.
Well, considering that these Nephilim are in a certain aspect, messengers, they bring science, they bring technology. What about the Malachim and other types of messengers?
Well, as you imply in what you just said, Malachim, which is translated angels, really means emissaries, messengers. And even they, the Nephilim, who some ancient peoples, especially the Greeks, considered as divine beings, I think whatever they did on earth, coming here for gold, supposedly they thought they're coming for gold, but maybe they were really sent to bring us about. And in that respect, they were just carrying out somebody else's divine plan. They too were just malachim or emissaries.
There is evidence that the National Security Council has extensive documentation of such extraterrestrials landing. What do you think of their evidence, and what do they say about it?
Well, I have not seen the evidence that they are keeping secret. I know of that one instance which I mentioned of the findings by ARAS, the infrared telescopic stations, which have been also suppressed. And again, this brings me to the question for which I don't have an answer, and maybe it has either political or international or military or maybe even religious reasons behind it, and that is, what is the fear of saying or admitting or having an open mind about the possibility that we are not alone in our solar system? As I said, I don't understand it, but others must have reasons, and I don't have the answer to that.
Most people don't understand this.
Well, so I'm in good company.
Most of us have watched the Air Force cover-up of space landings. Hangar 18 was a movie showing that cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
And we know they cover it up, but why is it true? What will we find out?
Well,
what else will we find out? That they
do you
want us
have a
to know?
theory why they are doing that?
Well, I can only ask the question, if we find this out, what more will we find out that they don't want us to know about our own development or cooperation with extraterrestrials, or what is going on in the polar caps, what is going on under the earth or in the sea? We understand the technology of spacecraft can go at great depths under the sea. You pointed out that Noah's Ark was the design of a modern equipped submarine that could endure this flood.
Yes.
So the technology is great, and the concealment, I don't know. Are the Nephilim here today? Are they in our governments? Is it they who don't want us to know too much? You talk of population control, allowing the starvation of the people at the time of the flood, which we think coincides with the date of the sinking of Atlantis. Are there Nephilim among us today, and are there powers that be that feel that they are in control of the rest of us and therefore are keeping secrets for their own reasons?
That is one interesting theory, but I don't know.
We talk about longevity of Nephilim, but we could also talk about their presence, the reincarnation of the Anunnaki, and therefore the presence in our midst of various evolutions. We see that there is a wide variety of evolution, development of intelligence, different types of bodies, cultures, traditions, religions.
No doubt.
So Earth seems to be at a crossroads of various sorts of evolutions that could have come in the same way those came from the one planet, the 12th planet.
I would definitely agree with you that even if we are not aware or cognizant of their presence, even, and I say it with an if, even if they have left at some point, they have not abandoned neither Earth nor us. They definitely, if they left, they intend to come back. They definitely let at least some people on Earth to be the guardians or the continuers of their civilization, their teachings, their technology. They may well be behind our own advances into space.
Apparently there are some people in the world today who do feel that they are the ones almost divinely ordained to make decisions for everyone else. We find very powerful people in various types of occupations, and they seem to be in control no matter what the people do. And those whom we are taught to believe are our enemies, we find that the leaders of both sides cooperate in various areas, so that although we're taught there are enemies, there is a vast cooperation. So it seems that either appointed or anointed ones or some actual race slightly different than the rest of humanity is in fact in control of war. War seems to be the dominating factor in the world today, and rivalries. And when you see who is whose rival, they seem to have very similar characteristics, which bring us to your third book about the wars of gods and men, and who did bring war here and why.
Well, the reasons for their own wars were very, very human, if one could put it that way. They started to quarrel about the rule and succession on their own planet. Those rivalries were transferred to Earth because of the two half-brothers and their sons. According to their rules of succession, if, say, Anu, the new ruler on their planet, had a son who was the firstborn, Enki, he was the crown prince, so to say. He was the heir, because he was the firstborn son. But if at any time afterwards a son was born to Anu by a half-sister of Anu, from the same father but not from the same mother, then that new son was the legal heir, not the firstborn, but the legal heir, and he superseded in the order of succession the firstborn. And in that case, it was Enlil. Enlil was born to Anu by a half-sister of Anu. And there are many texts where Enki cries out and says, I am the firstborn. Why am not I the one to succeed on the throne, if we want to use that word, of Nibiru? But he was not entitled to it. And just as there were conflicts between the sons of Abraham and between the sons of his sons, who was the firstborn, who was born by the favorite wife, who was born by a handmaiden, you know, Esau and Isaac, you find that this was the problem among them. For example, I mentioned the chief medical officer, Nincharsag, who was a half-sister of both of them, of Enki and Enlil. Now, Enlil managed, though he was later married to a nurse who became his wife, a young nurse who became his wife, he had, though he never married his half-sister, he had a son by her called Ninurta. Enki made tremendous efforts. He seduced his sister to have also a son by her, but he never succeeded in having a male son by his half-sister, and Enlil did. Now he had a firstborn son whom the Babylonians called Marduk and venerated eventually as their supreme god, supreme lord. And then there was this conflict about the son of the firstborn and the legal heir of the legal heir, who of them is entitled to be Lord of Earth. And there were wars and conflicts resulting from that. So their wars and their conflicts, maybe I should say, I'm sorry to say, or maybe it's disappointing to hear, but this is the truth, this is what comes out from those tales, were for very human-like reasons. One war that I termed the Pyramid Wars was really against the background of what is no less than a Romeo and Juliet love affair between Ishtar, who belonged to the house of Enlil, and the youngest son of Enki. And the oldest son, Marduk, opposed the marriage. And there was conflict and warfare on that basis as well. And it was in an instance that many things, if not all the things I say write about, could be described as incredible. But the most incredible thing, perhaps, is that there is an Egyptian text naming the date, the year in their calendar on Earth, when it was the first time in a struggle between the so-called two so-called Egyptian gods, Horus and Set, descendants all of Enki, where humans were enlisted or conscripted for the first time to join their battles. That was the first time, and it's recorded, incredibly, with the date, when for the first time we were taught to use weapons and to go fight each other in their causes, not in our causes. And that is how men learn to make war.
That's what we feel is happening to us today.
Well, but who is driving us today? I don't know. Either those
they're ideological drives,
mysterious beings, or our own greed, our own...
Well, we're lined up on battlefields for defending causes of capitalist corporations or Soviet governments, or not for real reasons of freedom. We're lined up to defend interesting madmen who've decided they want more territory, and we don't want more territory.
Well, if you read the third book, which deals with events 9,000 years ago, 8,000, 4,000, and 2,000 years ago, when nuclear weapons, I show, were used for the first time on Earth, you find the same no reasons for having wars.
Well, you show very effectively the rivalries that brought about that nuclear war that was the destruction of Sodom, and not only Sodom and Gomorrah, but through the cloud and the winds became the total destruction of the area of Mesopotamia. And would you like to tell us about that and Abraham's role in that event?
Yes, I was afraid you will never ask me. Now, one thing that was done, especially at the turn of the century and in the several decades afterwards, was that it wasn't fashion to analyze the Bible critically. And those critics of the Bible, most of them German scholars at the time, asked such question as, what is the independent evidence that there ever existed an Abraham or even a Moses? Some, I remember studying, were so clever that they said that there was really never a person Moses, but the stories refer to another one who adopted the name Moses. So, and that question, especially to me, since I'm a descendant of Abraham, was particularly interesting and important, and that is not only was there an Abraham, or am I the product of a myth, But if he was, as I believe that he was, who really was he? Why was he instructed to go from his birthplace, his land, which was Sumer, to another place, stay there, continue, go to Canaan, move fast, as the Bible says, to the Negev, go to Egypt, and he was, if he was just a nobody, a nomad, or some claim he was a marauding chieftain, you know, a sheik, living from being a highway robber. If he was all that, how come that the minute he came to Egypt, he was received by the Pharaoh? And we know he was received by the Pharaoh because he instructed his wife what to say and what not to say. When he came back from Egypt, another king, a Philistine king, met him and made a treaty with him. Again, if he was just somebody unimportant, why? So, as I found in the Mesopotamian Sumerian writings, the earlier, the more original texts dealing with various biblical tales, for example, the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel is told in Sumerian writings in greater detail. The tale of the deluge is told over 12 tablets. I ask myself also, if Abraham, according to the Bible, came from Sumer, came from a city called Ur, or Er as many here pronounce it, but the true pronunciation is Ur. If he came from there, if he participated in what the Bible describes as an international war, the war of the kings of the East, having raised an army and marched towards Canaan to fight certain Canaanite kings, and Abraham was involved in that. He turned them back, and then when they seized his nephew Lot, he pursued them up to Damascus and defeated them in Damascus. If he was a participant in all these events, if he witnessed, as we are told in the Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, is it really possible that all these sources that served as original, much more detailed texts for the other biblical tales, could it be that they really don't mention Abraham, don't mention the war of the kings, don't mention the upheavaling of the cities of the plain of the Jordan? Because if they don't, I really have a problem, you know, then who am I? And I did find texts that were uncovered, that were written on tablets such as these in various museums, that not only mention the name of Abraham, and I have here 2 tablets, and these are not replicas, these are the actual tablets. They are very small, because actually all they were customs receipts. There was a customs station in ancient Sumer, and all the trade the international trade had to pass through there, and the people had to pay duty, and these were their receipts. Now, luckily for our knowledge of history, what happened there, each receipt ended with an inscription of the date, the day of the month, and the year. The year was not like 1985 or whatever. The year was named after the major event of that year. So if in that year a major temple was built, it says year in which such and such temple was built. If it was a year in which a major war had taken place, it said year in which that place was attacked. It always said that place was destroyed, because no king admitted that he may have lost the war. He always succeeded. So one of these tablets has this inscription on it. This is the obverse, this is the reverse. The reverse has the year date, and what these Sumerian cuneiform characters say is Mu ne Ibruum ki Bachul. And in English it means year in which shepherding place of Ibruum destroyed. Now the name of Abraham, before it was changed to a Semitic sounding name, was Abram, and this is the Sumerian Ibruum. And this is a tablet from the 7th year of the reign of a Sumerian king called Amar-Sin, who in his record said that in that 7th year he raised an army to go to the Sinai Peninsula to attack Canaanite cities and to reach the spaceport that was in the Sinai Peninsula at the time. And he encountered someone blocking his way to the spaceport, not fighting him yet, but just blocking his way. And that was the shepherd Abraham. And I have in my book a map which I drew that was not found in archaeological sites, which shows the route of the invaders, which shows where Abraham from his headquarters at the place called Kadesh Barnea blocked their way to the spaceport. It shows how they turned back and only then actually fought the Canaanite kings, capturing Abraham's nephew Lot, and how Abraham then pursued. And I've submitted an article to one of the scientific magazines showing that Abraham actually possessed an elite corps of cavalry, which he used to pursue and capture this huge army and overwhelm them and retrieve or release his nephew. So I found in the Sumerian and other Mesopotamian sources details of that war, the description of the march and the destination, the year, the precise year, which was 2041 BC, the 7th year of Amar-Sin, and the admission in that inscription, and that there are a few tablets like that, it's not the only one, that the encounter, the military encounter, was with Abram. Now, Abraham therefore participated or was successful in his assignment to ward off any attack on the spaceport, including the site of Jerusalem, which played a major role.
Are you saying he was the appointed guardian of the space station?
Defender.
The defender.
Defender would be a more appropriate word, right?
And who appointed him?
The one whom he called his Lord.
And who was that?
I'm not prepared to say.
It had to have been Nephilim because it's their spaceport. Who else would want to guard it?
Well, let's leave it the way you put it.
He came from Ur, and he came as a man of high station. His wife
Right, as
also.
far as I could determine, again showing these various sources, he came of a family that was a royal priestly family. What assignment that family had in Ur, I explain in my book. That's how Abraham grew up in Ur. He was not born in Ur, he was born in Nippur. And I explained the rest of his mission and why he was selected. And also, once the Sumerian civilization was destroyed by the nuclear cloud, why it was he and his descendants who were chosen. And that is the meaning of the chosen people. Was chosen to uphold, continue, maintain, and keep on Earth the space civilization. the seed that will continue the preordained plan that is carried from one solar system to another.
Are you saying that you revealed this in your book, Wars of Gods and Men?
I don't know if I reveal it, but I say it. And so to the extent that I may be the first one saying it, maybe it is a disclosure.
But you're not actually stating which of the gods he is serving.
No, I'm not saying that because I don't want to say that.
But basically the concept is that he is one of the guardians of the guardian's shrine.
That's right.
And his seed.
That's correct.
And their descendants in the Sinai and
That's
in this
what I
Middle
believe
East.
in. But to the extent that you put it so personally to me, I think that certainly some of the descendants of Abraham, perhaps I am among them, have a role to play in moving this river within which, as I said, the fish individually can twist and turn and live and die and swallow each other or whatever. But the whole stream goes on, and I think that the descendants of Abraham are prime movers.
Now, if you take those descendants and see them not only as a bloodline, but as reincarnated, all of those who were of Abraham reincarnating, then you have a broadening concept of who this seed of Abraham might be, because they could have reincarnated not necessarily again through the bloodline, but through the various nations in the earth, since the prophecy is they're being scattered.
Well, the Hebrews have definitely intermarried over the 4,000 years since Abraham. So I don't think that the genetic code or the genetic memory or whatever it is that makes us, or some of us, just do those things, maybe sometimes even without wanting to do them. This is definitely spread among all the nations. I don't think that it's now limited just to somebody who goes to a Jewish synagogue, but it's probably part of the whole human story now.
I wonder if you consider that the warfare and the rivalries that are so carefully set forth in the Greek mythologies, and then on through this record of the use of nuclear energy by the Nephilim in their wars at Sodom, if you think that that is at the basis and root of the threatening and hovering of nuclear war today, is there a rivalry going on today?
Well, I don't know if I can speak with the same authority about current events as I claim to have regarding ancient events. Certainly I'm not uninformed and not without opinions, but maybe you should get somebody like Reagan and Gorbachev here and question them on that. But
are you prepared to say that any of the Nephilim remained, or any of the Anunnaki, or only those they appointed, such as kings and guardians? And if they're not here, when are they coming back? Are they coming back with the return of the 12th planet?
Well, if I'll answer everything, you will not invite me again.
That's what they said to us in Jerusalem.
Let's leave it for the next interview.
That's what the guide said. When you have your next book with you, your fourth book.
I would say in about 2 years.
So that's when you want to come back.
I can tell you its title, though.
All right.
The End of Days.
The End of Days?
The End of Days.
What days are you referring to?
All days.
All days.
Human days and Nephilim days.
There's a lot of endings prophesied in the Bible. We think in terms of the ending of 2000.
They will definitely be part of what I base my conclusions on.
Perhaps the beginnings and endings of civilizations are clocked by the cyclic return of the 12th planet.
Probably.
Since it has such an impact and is so disruptive.
I would agree with you in that conclusion.
We look to, in the concept of reincarnation, a progressive evolution of the soul, a purpose, a union with the Supreme God over all the gods and Nephilim and the ones who develop their technological wizardry and spacecraft. And we think in terms of, I think, the Hindu concept, which is also Christian, in terms of ultimately the acceleration or the ascension into a plane of spirit that is beyond this created universe. And in that sense of it, we think of the end of all days as also the end of, let's say, of our karma, the balancing of our karma, and our evolution in these planes, and that there is an ultimate return, and that those who came forth from the Supreme Being have a divine spark, and through that divine spark they return.
That's, I think we are saying the same thing in different words.
So we like to think that the end of all days is not the annihilation, but a point of transcendence.
It's just another beginning.
Hopefully in a new and higher level.
The end is the beginning, and the future is the past.
ZECHARIA SITCHIN, thank you for being the flame of freedom that speaks at Summit University Forum.
Thank you for having me.
You've been watching Summit University Forum with Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Summit University Forum, where the flame of freedom speaks. The views expressed by those interviewed at Summit University Forum are not necessarily those of Elizabeth Clare Prophet or the faculty of Summit University. The preceding public access program has been presented through the assistance of Summit University, Box A, Malibu, California, 90265. If you would like to know more, call this number or write this address.